So we return back to this question of which position is best. This goes back again to our fundamental strategist challenge here. At the end of the day, we need to first and foremost think about our values again. What is our mission? What is our scope? How do we define ourselves? These are important when thinking about what competitive position is best for a particular firm. But we also don't want to lose sight of these questions around opportunities and capabilities. So another way to think about this is proposing another corollary to our fundamental principle, that if some competitive positions are more favorable than others, we would expect firms to adopt those strategies. Seems to go without saying. What we've been talking about in the previous 3 sessions are ways to think about how we can kind of push back on this fundamental principle. We've talked about industry structure. Are there structural elements of the industry that shelter certain positions? As I talked about in the beer industry, being a large-scale, mass-produced beer manufacturer can be very attractive because it creates these you can capture these economies of scale. Firm capabilities. How may our capabilities help establish and defend a position? Do we have a sustainable competitive advantage? And then finally, this question about competitive dynamics. How are positions likely to evolve over time? Now, fortunately, we've developed a number of tools in our toolkit to help us answer those questions. To this question of industry structure, we have our 5 forces analysis. To our question about capabilities, we have, obviously, our capabilities analysis. And then finally, to our question about competitive dynamics, we have our competitive life cycle analysis as a way to think through those issues. So with these tools in your toolkit, they can then work together collaboratively to determine what is the best position for a given firm. I suggest the following 4 questions here as a way to get at this. First, what favorable strategic opportunities exist? This is both an analysis of the market, but also an analysis of the industry structure, a la Porter's 5 forces and the like. Our environmental analysis can be very helpful in identifying these strategic opportunities as well. Second, how contested is a position? There's some work that discusses the idea of blue ocean strategies. This is the idea of uncontested positions, uncontested markets here. Clearly, those are more attractive than ones that are more contested, what are sometimes referred to as red ocean markets, though not always easy to identify and perhaps not always even available to you in a given industry. But is this a contested position, or is it one where others aren't currently occupying? Third question, how can we establish this competitive position? We believe it's a valuable competitive position, maybe contested, maybe not. Do we first have the capabilities to execute? Can we actually establish that competitive position? If Kia sits here and says, wow, there is a great opportunity to be a luxury sports car manufacturer, what are the chances that they will be able to make that transition? Perhaps they can, but one could imagine that there would be others better positioned. And that's why we say, especially vis-a-vis your rivals here. Do you have the capabilities to execute and maybe out-execute your rivals in trying to establish this position? And for many firms, when there are contested markets, you need to think about ways in which you can create value in unique ways as a way to perhaps get entry into that position. It is often the case that niche entry or a focused low-cost strategy is the way that new entrants to a market or a position in the market can achieve a position that they can then grow over time. So how do we establish that competitive position? And then finally, how can we defend that position once established? Do we have any is it sustainable competitive advantage? This gets back to our capabilities analysis once again. And then finally, how is the industry likely to evolve? This gets to our competitive life cycle analysis here. So hopefully you're beginning to see that these various tools in the toolkit that we've been discussing are necessary but not sufficient for determining valuable competitive positions. It's when they work together that they then begin to paint a more complete picture of where a valuable competitive position might exist. So let me end here with some takeaways. Positions, like markets, are defined by both market needs and ways of delivering on those needs. And we've talked about this in a number of different contexts. Industries, it's important to note, often have more than one rent-producing position. It is often not the case that there's just simply one way to do business and one way only. There's often different ways firms can position themselves and be successful within a given marketplace. Rent-producing positions, these economic profits that we're interested in, rely both on favorable industry structure, as we've talked about, and or superior capabilities. And it's the integration of those two ideas that lead us to identify these valuable positions. Firms can combine multiple positions at once, this idea of an integrative strategy, but you better have a good strategic logic for the combination and the capabilities to pull it off. So be cautious there in trying to pursue one of those strategies. Ultimately, the challenge of strategy is to capture these valuable, defensible, competitive positions. And once again, I hope you can see again how the various tools that we've developed can work in concert with one another to determine what is the best competitive position for a given firm. Thank you very much.